Okay, so as promised, I have my enzyme models here, and I just want to demonstrate some specificity stuff and our allosteric and competitive inhibitors. So if we start with this one, we have two possible substrates here, right? So we have our active site here, and we have a positive and a negative charge, or sorry, a negative and a positive charge here. So if we look at our substrates and we put this one in here, it seems to fit, right? It fits pretty good. But as you can see, our yellow here does not match up with our yellow here. And we want a negative and a positive next to each other, right? Because opposites attract. So we don't want our two negatives next to each other or our two positives. So this enzyme or this substrate isn't going to work at all with this enzyme. Instead, we are going to have this red enzyme. So you can see that our circle fits up nicely with there. It's all matching. And we have our two positives and our two negatives paired together. So our opposites are attracting. So then if we go and look at this enzyme here, so we have our active site again, and then this is going to be our allosteric site. So first, let's talk about specificity. So we have our two substrates here. We have our orange substrate and our green substrate. So if we look, they are pretty similar in shape. We just have a little notch here on our green one where we don't have it on our orange. So if we try to bond our orange one in here, we put it in there, but nothing is going to happen, right? So because our substrate isn't the right substrate for this enzyme, no reaction is going to be helped by this enzyme. So if we have the notches here and the notches here. If we put our green and our substrate into our enzyme, you can see it has kind of that induced fit there. It's a little snug hug by our enzyme. And then when we go to pull it out, you can see that it breaks our substrate apart. So then we have our two products there. Now, looking at inhibitors. We have our two inhibitors. We have blue and purple. So our purple is going to be our competitive inhibitor. So our competitive inhibitor, remember, bonds to the active site, and it competes for the active site with the substrate. So if we just plop that right in there, we can see that our substrate can no longer fit into our active site because there is something blocking it, right? So that's going to be our competitive inhibition. Now, if we look at our allosteric inhibition, remember, allosteric inhibitors bond to places other than the active site. So they can either block the active site or change the shape. So this one is actually going to change the shape of the enzyme. So if you watch as I I have it backwards, as I sort of wedge this in here, you can see that the shape of the enzyme is changing, right? So we started with this nice open shape here on our active site. But as I add this allosteric inhibitor, the shape of it is changing. So now we have our allosteric inhibitor in there, and we take our substrate and it can no longer fit in because the shape of the active site has changed. So allosteric bonds in a place other than our active site, and our competitive inhibitor is always going to bond in place or in the active site, but both will prevent our substrate from bonding with the enzyme.